Hello, everyone. My name is Noel Nefshire. I'm Director of Automation Alley's International Business Center and also head up Global Strategic Partnerships for the organization. Today's discussion is going to focus on trade and investment opportunities in the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, and also the broader region known as the Gulf Cooperation Council, GCC. That includes 6 countries, starting with the UAE, but also there's Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia. So just briefly stated, Automation Alley was created in 1999, and we are Michigan's Industry 4.0 Knowledge Center with more than 1,200 members. My roles and responsibilities are to help companies do business overseas, and on the other side of the coin is to help foreign companies set up their operations in Southeast Michigan. So with me today is a good friend and colleague. Her name is Ann Jaffrey. She's director of the state of Michigan's Foreign Office in Dubai and also managing partner of Channels Business Solutions, also based in Dubai. And it's always a pleasure to talk with someone as insightful and cerebral as you. In the 20 minutes that we have, I would like to start out by asking you if you could please describe the services that you offer to U.S. companies that are exploring investment opportunities in your part of the world.
Well, thank you, Noel. I appreciate you inviting me today. It's always a pleasure working with Automation Alley and you and your team. Just diving right in, when I talk about, I reference a lot UAE because that's where I'm based, but another reason why I reference UAE is because UAE really is the benchmark setter in the region. So what you see happening in UAE, they're usually the first to jump in terms of development and innovation, and then you find that the other countries come in on the same way right behind them. So quite often in parallel, you'll see things going on in UAE and Saudi Arabia and so forth. When it comes down to the services that we provide, we basically assist Michigan companies in evaluating the UAE and the surrounding countries as potential export markets for goods and services. So that might be a report on their industry and the key players in the market, or it may be a distributor search, or organizing meetings on their behalf for a visit in person or nowadays virtually. We do due diligence on companies and inquiries, and we provide import compliance and regulatory reports. Basically anything that is going to ease their market entry. I would say most common is identifying a distributor, an agent, or a representative, and we cover every industry and every vertical in that industry, from aviation robotics to national cybersecurity to the Internet of Things in health tech.
Great. You know, we're living in the age of the pandemic, and I'm just wondering, how is the UAE, the GCC, and for that matter, the Middle East, North African region coping with the virus? Because we spoke earlier about how seems to be a spike throughout the world, so-called second wave of the virus, and with the combination of it being the flu season, it's sort of a double whammy. But what are you seeing in the UAE in the broader region?
Well, when you look at the U.S. population of 350 million, you look at a country like UAE where there's 10 million, or Saudi Arabia where there's 40 million, it's going to just automatically be easier to manage it because of the size of the population. But we were struck in UAE and the Middle East sooner than the US really was, and the government acted swiftly. I mean, it's just in general easier because of the form of government we have. When I say we, I consider myself an Emirati as much as an American these days. But the form of government we have, it's easier for them to act swiftly and implement things quicker, because sometimes democracy is not such a great thing when it comes to combating a pandemic. So we went through an initial lockdown. There was a curfew. We all went to remote working, testing PPE. None of that was ever a shortage for us. In fact, UAE donated huge amounts of PPE to other nations, not just those that were lesser off, but they did large donations to the UK and so forth. So they've been one of the largest contributors of PPE to other nations. And even if you go to a grocery store, they would hand you out masks. So it was nothing like it was in America. There were no shortages on the grocery shelves of cleaning supplies or anything like that.
That's interesting.
So because they were able to, Yeah, because they were able to act quickly, they were able to manage the pandemic and recovery much quicker. They also put into place a lot of different stimulus programs and so forth to get to kind of stopgap the economic slump that was coming in because of the pandemic. They worked with the government, really put in a lot of programs to help both businesses but individuals with rent and you know, utility payments and things like that.
Sure. Well, and
So
you mentioned an interesting point, because, you know, in the United States, we're still experiencing shortages of cleaning products, Lysol, toilet paper, Bounty, etc. And
mhm,
so it's incredible how UAE was able to, it must really have a efficient, productive supply chain management infrastructure in place to avoid those shortages. But then, of course, United States, it's a much larger country. But that said,
right.
compare and contrast the U.S. and what other countries are doing and what their experiences are and how they've been able to recover in different ways. So,
Mhm.
were there any lessons learned from the coronavirus, and how has it changed the UAE and the region overall? I guess let me rephrase. Has this accelerated the adoption of advanced technologies related to, say, healthcare, manufacturing, oil and gas, IT and ICT, you know, including the video conferencing tools that you and I are using right now?
So I would say that UAE was already moving swiftly in that direction. They're forging ahead into the fourth industrial revolution. You're
Mm.
seeing, you know, innovation is a big push for them. So like any kind of secure tech, health tech, agri-tech, fintech, ed tech. So they had already been implementing broad stimulus plans just prior to COVID that made it attractive to investors. And they were already innovating in general. So it wasn't, they were already accelerating is what I'm trying to say. So
Right.
now it has just been reinforcing what they were already, their development goals were already set at. So we
Well, you
have
know, it's
seen a
interesting.
quicker uptake.
Right, right. So I think you're absolutely right. I mean, UAE was sort of better positioned than a lot of countries around the world to absorb a pandemic like this, because it's pretty much been the Silicon Valley of that part of the world for, in my view,
Mhm.
the last you know, 20 even 25 years. So you know, this interview is timely because recently the uh, the UAE and Bahrain signed the Abraham Accord with Israel, recognizing its right to exist and establishing diplomatic relations with Israel. What's the impact going to be on the region? Because now we're hearing the possibility that perhaps Saudi Arabia or Kuwait will get on board in terms of establishing direct diplomatic ties with Israel.
Mhm. Mhm. Well, again, I think that it goes back to the fact that UAE always has been the one that ventures out first and is a benchmark setter. So I anticipate that that will become a reality in terms of Saudi Arabia, but you never know. It does seem to be the question of the month, indeed. And these are just really my personal opinions, but I believe that the signing of the Abraham Accords was very transactional and was driven as much by commerce as by peaceful re-engagement between the countries. Opening Israel up to UAE and UAE up to Israel, it'll have a major commercial impact on not just the two nations, but for the entire region. Because as UAE's mature transportation logistics infrastructure makes it the natural trade hub. So UAE definitely wants to attract entrepreneurial innovators from Israel
Sure.
by offering them a commercial environment that's primed for them to develop and scale up their businesses and offer their innovation not just to UAE but to the broader GCC region. And US multinationals who have offices both in Israel and the UAE. I mean, it's always been such a problem if company people were trying to travel to Israel and then to UAE and had to go through another country and problems with the passport and all that. So that has made things so much easier. So movement of people and movement of goods is going to become, it's going to just make things a lot easier for US companies. And UAE also, also offers an unencumbered supply chain base alternative to China now. So with COVID, certainly it demonstrated to a lot of companies around the world that they couldn't use a single source supply chain anymore. You know, that once they got blocked off from China, it was like, you know, we need to figure out alternatives. So UAE
Especially,
now is positioned right there.
oh yeah, yeah, no doubt. Good for them to sort of take advantage of the fact that, you know, particularly U.S. companies are looking to alternative supply chains outside of China. You know, given the recent trade tensions that we've had with China, you're seeing a lot of investment leaving China and going to, for example, Vietnam, Cambodia, Malaysia, but also Mexico seems to be benefiting. And so it's interesting to learn that the UAE is also being viewed as an alternate supply chain for that part of the world
Yeah.
to
Yeah, and developing advanced manufacturing and so forth, you know, I mean, it's cost-effective market to work from strategically as a hub geographically. It makes sense. I mean, they're 8 hours plane ride to any point in the world, they say. So it
I
just,
think it's a combination of economic, political, and geopolitical realities that are sort of shaping the future of that region. And what I mean is that the region is sort of transforming its way from an oil-based economy, given the push toward electrification and concern about climate change. And so they seem to be a little bit more forward-looking. I know, you know, today I checked, and the barrel of oil on the world market is $39. And for Saudi Arabia, for example, not to pick on them, but Saudi Arabia, in order for oil drilling to be profitable, they have to have it at $70 to $80. So it's not just the UAE, but it's also the Saudi Arabia is looking to create sort of a Dubai on the Red Sea and encourage manufacturing investment in that part of the region. So hopefully Saudi Arabia will be able to learn a lot from the Emirates in that regard. So what are the GCC's immediate needs? Again, the Gulf Cooperation Council, the 6 countries I mentioned, which includes UAE. What are their immediate needs that U.S. companies can fulfill right now, whether it's healthcare, education, advanced manufacturing, or IT? Others.
okay, so as I mentioned, UAE is driving hard and fast on their goals towards becoming a digital economy, working on that 4th industrial revolution. I mean, innovation is the name of the game. So, for example, UAE just signed an innovation MOU with the U.S. Department of Commerce, which is the first time that has happened between the governments. So if you look at the strong industries already present in UAE, if you look at aviation and logistics, healthcare, defense, cybersecurity, space mission to Mars, alternative clean energy, yeah, food security. I mean, that certainly, food
They're
security was
really,
already on the radar.
yeah, they're swinging for the
Sorry?
fences. And they're swinging for
Yeah,
the fences in all these different industries. So
yeah.
incredible.
So if you take those industries and then overlay their digital economy drivers, you see that if your company can bring innovation, artificial intelligence, big data, IoT, any kind of collaboration and knowledge transfer, if you can combine those critical industries with these kind of you know, digital drivers and innovation, there's where your opportunity is going to be in not just UAE, but in the Middle East and in Saudi
This really,
Arabia.
yeah, this really plays in the hands of Automation Alley and our 1,200 members, because as I mentioned in my introduction, we're the Industry 4.0 knowledge leader. And
Right.
so Industry 4.0 is really critical to the future success of America in order to maintain its global competitiveness. So some of the elements that you mentioned, big data, AI, IoT, and of course there's robotics, cybersecurity. I mean, there's a lot of moving parts in Industry 4.0, which is why we look forward to leading a trade mission there, hopefully soon. and during the World Fair, which brings me to my next question. What is the significance of the World Fair being hosted by the UAE in 2021? And I believe it goes into 22 as well. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes.
So
Yes.
can you just talk about the World's Fair and why U.S. Companies should attend?
Sure. So Expo 2020, which is now taking place in 2021, it actually starts 1 year from today, October 1st, 2021. This is the first Expo ever hosted outside or hosted in the Middle East. It's also the first Expo that where international visitors will outnumber by far the national visitors at an Expo. Um, as you know, Noel, you've been to UAE. UAE in general is an amazing place to visit. It's understandable why so many people from my family to my business associates to my Uber drivers tell me that UAE is on their bucket list.
For
So
sure.
anyone, yeah, so anyone who knows UAE knows when they set their mind to doing something, they do it in a really big way. Whenever the leadership comes out with these goals, and I think, oh my goodness, do they really think they can do that? Of course they think they can do that, and they do that. So never underestimate the UAE.
No,
There'll
I
be
learned
tons
that
of,
a long time ago. That's for sure. So
yeah,
they
yeah,
really, they set the bar really high now, right?
right, right.
And,
So
and developed countries
and
and
you don't have a
mature
choice.
markets, yeah, developed markets and mature markets like, the US, Germany can learn a lot about how they successfully created this economic development strategy because they started from nothing. I mean, they were just strictly
Yeah,
oil and gas, but they saw peak oil on the horizon and they took measures to block that by creating these other industries in order to support the economy in the future. And the future is now. Do you
hmm.
believe that
And it's
there's,
not like they just started thinking about that now. I mean,
oh,
they
right.
began a
Yeah, I know.
diversification plan.
Yeah,
Like 2009, they were looking at alternative energy and
right.
green renewable energies. You know, it's not
Sure.
like they're waiting for things to happen to them. They're very proactive.
Yeah, yeah, excellent. Yeah, definitely. It's sort of ironic when you stop to think about it, because I mean, here they were oil-based economy, but now they're pushing electrification with renewable alternative energy
Hmm.
sources. So anyway,
Hmm.
yeah, it's funny how the world can change in just a matter
Yeah.
of 10 or 20 years. Because I mean, if I went to sleep in the year 2000 or woke up today, I wouldn't recognize this world, especially the UAE. I mean, it's amazing. You just look at their skyline, and
Yeah.
maybe 30 years ago it was nothing but desert. They go big and they go large. I mean, Burj Khalifa, the
Yeah.
tallest building in the world, is just one case in point. So anyway, can you talk about any trade shows? We spoke about the World Fair, and for U.S. companies to get a bigger bang for the buck, are there any
Mhm.
major trade shows being held in the UAE during the World Fair? As you know, Automation Alley in the state of Michigan, we participated in Arab Health and also
Mhm.
the Air Show and IDEX too. So
Mhm.
can you let us know if any of those are going to be in town in October 21 through 22?
Sure. Just to go back a little bit more on the expo point, I mean, in terms
Oh,
of why
sure. I'm sorry.
businesses should come, it's okay, it's okay. I mean, when you look at the global meeting of the minds, it's going to take place at Expo 2020 under the themes of connecting minds and creating the future, and the sub themes of sustainability, mobility, and opportunity. There's going to be lots of ways for U.S. companies to engage and benefit from attending, both through the U.S. Pavilion as well
Sure.
as at venues across, I mean, with the different seminars and events and summits and product launches and global showcases of innovation. It's really going to be something that businesses should come and participate in, but also there'll be a lot of things going on the sidelines of Expo 2020.
Right.
Um, Nice to mention too, double snaps for our U.S. ambassador, Ambassador Ricolta. He's a Michigander, and
Yeah,
he's also
right.
the Commissioner General. Yeah, he's also the Commissioner General of the U.S.'s participation at Expo. So the consulate and embassy are quite involved in engagement with U.S. companies
Yeah,
for
actually,
opportunity at Expo.
yeah, Ambassador John Ricolta stopped by Automation Alley last month. So Cynthia Hutchison, my coworker, and I had the opportunity to meet with him. And anyway, I know that U.S. is going to have a huge presence there
Mhm.
with their own pavilion, but this is really a great way to underscore U.S. soft power by demonstrating, how technologically savvy and innovative we are as a nation. And I think a lot of
Mhm.
people know that intuitively, but to come and see it firsthand, I think, really helps the image of the United States sometimes. And so we're looking forward to being part of it, certainly. And we're working, by the way, with the state of Michigan. Incidentally, we actually put Ambassador Oculta in touch with Governor Whitmer's office. So
Hmm.
they're going to be talking about bringing a delegation to the World Fair that will be hopefully around one of the trade shows we talked about a moment ago.
Mhm.
So
Okay.
yeah, for
Well,
sure.
trade shows in general, I mean, that there's, are they
Oh,
off? Are they on? We've been watching those, even with IDEX coming up in Jan or February this coming year.
sure,
We don't know if
sure.
that's going to be on, so we're
Yeah,
monitoring all that. But in general, we are expecting that during the World's Fair, during the Expo, there will be the air show, Arab Health and Arab Lab.
sure.
There'll be oil and gas at ADIPEC. There's GTEX, which is IT and ICT. There's WETEX, which is water and electricity. There's construction shows, interior shows. I mean, Dubai really is, and UAE are the exhibition center of the region, and they attract visitors from all over the globe. So it'll be
Yeah,
even more so important to participate in those shows because people will already be there. So it
yeah,
just kind of
exactly.
goes hand in hand.
For
Yeah, so
sure. How many countries,
should be
do you have any
exciting.
idea about how many countries will be participating in the World Expo in Dubai next year?
All of them.
All of them. Yeah, I know. I know. Yeah, that's pretty
I mean, some are going in directly, some are grouped together. I know that the UAE
sure.
has been very good about assisting the lesser nations who don't have budgets to participate in
Yeah.
helping them with having a role in Expo. So
Yeah, I was
I
just
expect.
glancing. Yeah, I was just glancing over at Lisa because she attended the World Trade Fair in Shanghai, and I think the look she
Mm,
was giving me is just name the countries that weren't there. So anyway,
yeah,
so this will actually be my first World's Fair. I've never been to one, so I'm really excited about
me
it. And it's really
too.
exciting for UAE and the entire region as well. So,
Mhm.
so beyond the obligatory due diligence, what piece of advice would you give to companies thinking about entering the GCC market for the first time? And I know this is sort of an unfair question because I'm treating GCC as a monolithic entity, but obviously there's different ways of doing business and cultural idiosyncrasies in each
Mhm.
one of those six nations. But
Mhm.
any just general advice that you can give in closing?
Sure. They are very similar, though. I mean, they have a common customs law, so that's a big advantage for selling to the region where you only pay customs when you enter one of the nations,
Sure.
and then you don't have to pay it again. But
Yep.
um, advice is the name of the game for me. So, how much time do you have?
No, 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 I
I,
understand. But that's,
I,
I'll tell you what, though, you make life easier for people because, I mean, you've lived in Dubai all these years and, you're
yes.
in contact with all the players. So, one of the big issues that companies have, no matter where they do business around the world, or even if they're doing it next door in the state of Ohio or Indiana or California, Texas, it
Mhm.
doesn't matter, is trust. It's trust.
Right,
And
right,
so,
right.
you do a lot of blocking and tackling in terms of being able to identify reputable people for our Michigan companies to do business there. So, I mean, our past trade missions to
Right.
the UAE have been so successful thanks to your efforts. So,
Thank
but,
you.
yeah, but anyway, we really appreciate you being with us today, shedding light on this part of the world. Not to mention how companies can take advantage of doing business while overcoming some of the common challenges or hurdles that they face when doing business around the world. So
Mhm.
with that, I hope you have a great weekend. It's hard to believe it's October 1st here. And
I
I
know.
know, I know. I'm still trying to figure out what the spring and summer went. But Anne, once again, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. And we look forward to talking to you again soon.
Yeah, it's really my pleasure, Noel. It's always It's always great to work with you and Lisa and the people there at Automation Alley, and also as a Michigander myself, it's
That's
personal when it
right.
comes to
That's
helping.
right. Yeah, we got to
Yeah.
remind everybody you're a homegirl. So, all
Yeah,
right.
in that state up north, as the Ohio guys will say.
Yeah, yeah,
All right.
exactly. So, all
Well,
right, Ann, thank you
thank
so